can't pull me down. So if you can't find me, look to the western sky. As someone told me lately, everyone deserves the chance to fly. And if I'm flying so low, at least I'm flying free. To those who'd ground me, take a message back from me. Tell them how I am defying gravity. I'm flying high, defying gravity, and soon I'll match them in renown. And nobody in all of Oz, no wizard that there is or was, is ever gonna bring me
Recently, Katie and I attended the Gay Pride Parade in Tulsa. While waiting to start moving, we were chatting with Joe Nuri, standing aside the All Souls float. Now, you know Joe, almost certainly, whether you think you do or not. He's an All Souls parishioner. He's the All Souls Food Bank Bring a Can to Church man, the one in the Andy Warhol Campbell Soup apron, currently showing on a poster near you. And there he is, in charge of the float, too. So Joe told us right there about a book about finite and infinite games and why it mattered. And so, in a sense, a really good one, this is Joe's sermon. I checked with him on that, and he said he'd have to watch it later. He was teaching an RE class just now. But the parade setting was one that Rilke would have appreciated. Before us were all the floats, all covered with work that we would call art. There were all the people along the way, 10 or 20,000, many sporting adornments and tattoos and writings that we would call art. And there were the people. This sounds like Ma Jode. There were the people, and they just kept coming. And they, too, themselves, were surely art. And to explain this coming together, there was the parade project itself, one to express our commitment and love to people without regard to whom they love. So, what exactly, you ask, is a finite game, and why title this sermon about play and possibility? Sit back and relax and hark back to a time long ago, to a gender-fied era of televised pageants of beauty. And behold, a finite game. You know it. You know it. How she responds. You've heard the question, you've heard the hackneyed response many times. If you could have just one wish, what would it be? And what does she say? And I'm reluctant to act this out too dramatically. I concede that Bill Murray could put a much better edge on it, but it's something like, I would wish for world peace. But really, what kind of world would that be? What kind of a world would it have to be like? Would it be a world where there were no disagreements, no arguments, no war, no suffering? Would it be one where there was no futile striving, no unrequited love, no frustrated hopes, no unfulfilled dreams? This kind of analysis might be called hypothetical nullification. It suggests that there is something about the way we are as humans that would have to be left out of such a world. But it suggests, too, that this something might be on balance, something we might like to hold on to. So perhaps this dilemma cannot be escaped. Still, consider head on what it would mean to live in a world where there were no competing interests, no tension-filled arrangements of people in which it was impossible for all their aspirations to come true. This kind of analysis might be called stretching a point, but the dilemma remains. It seems we really can't have it all. Now, Miss America herself might show us that. After all, she's just one, and there she is, as the song goes, speaking to the world from center stage, basking in the bright lights of fame. While if you look closely, there now, in the darkened background, behind her, you see, are the ones whom she's just beat. The losers, as they are delicately called. They are a necessary part of this finite game. As all of such games, it's one where the participants choose to play, where there must be opponents, there are rules, there are eligibility requirements, there are time limits, and most significantly, when the time is up and it comes to an end, there must be a winner. Determining the winner is the whole point. And then everyone agrees to give the winner the title, if even begrudgingly. And now it's time to go home and think about dinner. So do our dilemmas stand utterly in the way, rebuking us for being so optimistic, so silly for imagining that there might be a model for a better way to live? I think there is one, having asked that question. Joe thinks there's one. It's a model that's been used throughout history in behalf of marginalized and oppressed people everywhere. And better yet, it's one that each of us can use in our own lives, oppressed or not. This model is the infinite games that Joe told us about at the parade's start. It's what James P. Carse, it's like cars with an E on the end, writes about in his book, Finite and Infinite Games. Not too amazingly, he thinks there's a better way too. As I listened to Joe channeling Carse, it occurred to me that seeing myself as a player in an infinite game made things so much easier. There was something timeless and organic and value-driven about it. Well, to choose a near-to-hand example, it was helpful to me to see my life with Katie as an infinite game. The criterion for my decisions about how to participate in the game would be simply, what should I do to keep it going? The simplicity was overwhelming to me, and in sensing that, I felt I could see all the way through with one very long lens, but in one very real picture, all the way to my own end and to the time beyond for those who survived me. Much of our lives, as you've probably realized, is arranged as finite games, and I'm not suggesting they should be banned. When something is really a game for us in the sense that it's a diversion, it focuses our attention and takes us out of the moment. You know, that's the thing we're supposed to be in so much. And focused as we are, we can get a lot of gaming done. Or alternatively, in a much more common game, our jobs, we can get a lot of work done. Things do need to be done. Somebody said, attention must be paid. As an aside, maybe you'll recall the kindergarten parable about the ant and the grasshopper. And so it seems perhaps we have been graded ever since, us, all busy at being good ants. To be fair, finite games work well in their own realms. In the same way that they led to our crowning of Miss America, They lead, more generally put, to results that are driven by rules. And we often take this to mean, to imply predictability. And generally speaking, that's true. There's a political subtext here that I'm not going to. But the more we know of the rules, the better we can predict. This certainty, we imagine, can salve our anxiety about our futures. But I think it does not. I think there is no easy way to sidestep the inescapable dilemmas. But there is a way. There are useful games that are not time limited. These other games are not finite but infinite. They are games for a life beyond certainty. They leave behind a winning effort aimed at wealth or status or power in favor of ensuring the continuation of play itself. This is a meta world where the rules may change, even the participants, but the game never ends. Indeed, to take another meta step, the very knowledge that the game will continue, that that's the objective, can itself guide our actions, can give us a standard for the way to be. If you're in love with someone or something, a project or this congregation, then the game plan is to do what keeps the love continuing. So what's an infinite game got that a finite one doesn't? For one thing, it avoids the seriousness of our day-to-day lives, and it opens the door to a more subtle, more playful way of being. The joyfulness of infinite play, its laughter, lies in learning to start something we cannot finish. Infinite players do not win titles so they'll be known, so they'll become immortal. Instead, they play as mortals, and they have simply their own names. Finite play is contradictory because those players desire to bring play to an end. They want it to be over, to have won. Let's get this over, let's win, let's get the title, let's go home, to do something less serious. This actually struck a chord with me when I was reading Carse's book, because it is clear, for example, and this is a fairly attenuated example, in the Olympics, when somebody wins 3 or 4 or 5 of the golds in a swimming meet, and you discover that they've been swimming 11 or 12 hours a day since they were 4. And this is a very finite game, and it works. They win. And it's very serious. The Miss America pageant was a time-limited game, a contest of beauty and poise and talent. But it was most decidedly not an effort to achieve world peace. It was serious because the players had chosen it as a way around the dilemmas, a way to search for certainty. They could create a diversion from a life of meaningful values and substitute for it an abstraction, one built on rules that would produce meaning, ones that would mask their anxiety about what their lives were really for. Now, devoting your life to a finite game has one major drawback. Psychologically, it commits you to endowing the new created finite game with seriousness, and thus your life becomes nothing more than the very abstract game you've created. And so in turn, a winner-driven game comes to stand in for life. When we win, we'll think it's over. We learn to demand a prize at the end, I might add, and our sense of what can be accomplished in the world becomes fixed. The future is over. When the game's over, it's over. Our sense of what can be accomplished becomes entrained to the rules, and everybody knows you can't change the rules in the middle of the game. Values can be left behind. When I wrote this sermon, I wrote right after that, objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. Everything about our ways of making a better future suffers. Our optimism, our courage, our playfulness, our still not yet fully formed hopes for the future, our willingness to envision and then to make long-term commitments for ourselves and those who will continue to live after we die. Evidence for this suffering is all around. The middle class suffers as executives heed only the next quarter's numbers and their own salaries. The long-term economy and their workers' hopes for continuing employment be damned. The effectuation of the climate accords, indeed the world itself, suffers as countries gauge their short-term economic interests as predominantly important. So I say, to hell with the rules. Let's imagine a world for the moment with infinite games, where the rules are to promote a never-ending continuation of play. When we see that there is about to be a victor and a spate of losers, let's look at what the rules are trying to do, and let's rewrite them as we go to keep the game alive. Let's be less concerned about rules for the serious finite game players, and let's be playful enough to relate as joyous, free persons having a relationship that is open to surprise, one where everything that happens is of real consequence. Now, here is where someone in the back of the room, maybe that person in the joke who says it's turtles all the way down, raises a hand up and says, "Can you give us some examples of an infinite game? And are you saying that all finite games are frivolous or trivial?" And to the second question, the answer is no. An economy requires finite games, and not everyone can be an electrician or a teacher or a mechanic or a brain surgeon or play for the Yankees without the approval of their potential colleagues and competitors, without rules. And now to the first question. Thinking of Karsa's ideas, I've come up with 3 examples. Once you start thinking this, you'll find them everywhere. I found one in an essay on tact. And I think the point was simply that sometimes people pretend to be tactful as a way of telling others how to be. And the suggestion in this article was that, no, it might be that you're tactful in order to provide helpful information to the other. Just a slight twist of the lens brings it into focus. So now back to the 3 examples, leaving tact aside. These are bigger ones. One involves women, one involves Black Americans, and one involves Jews. All of them groups who've been marginalized, if not worse, by a world that created not only the games and the rules, but also the winners and losers they produced. As for gays, as even another example, well, this sermon began at the Gay Pride Parade. Here's the first one. In 1982, Carol Gilligan, a Harvard-based psychologist, published In a Different Voice. There she espoused a care-based ethics, one a lot different from earlier systems about how to act in this world. She explained with completely justifiable glee that the then much vaunted 6 stages of moral development were bankrupt. They had been put together by men, they focused on abstract principles and a stern sense of moral duty, and under them it was unusual for girls to reach the 6th stage of moral development. Most of them topped out at 3. In its place, she proposed a maternal, care-focused ethics based on spontaneous feelings of caring, compassion, intimacy, and empathy. It became known as Feminist Ethics. It was followed by Sharon Welch's book, A Feminist Ethic of Risk, in 1990. There, she, as Gilligan had done, left behind a patriarchal world of linear thinking, one that led people and governments to avoid repairing the world where the effort could not guarantee success when it was begun. Efforts like getting rid of drunk drivers or embarking on a nuclear non-proliferation program. It couldn't be said positively, This is how it can be done. Because the problems wouldn't submit to the finite models for how to get there from here. The problem of building an atomic bomb, you see, it would. What luck. But the new ethicists could do it. They would take the risk of starting something whose end could not be promised or even seen. And they started Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, and it worked. And as difficulties in the MAD model arose, they changed the rules to stay ahead of the surprises that kept occurring, to make sure that their game would continue. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is, by the way, engaged in the same venture as RBG, the movie, reveals. She, along with a lot of others, men and women, are devoted to continuing another infinite game, one based squarely on Gilligan's and Welch's work. It's called legal feminism. I should apologize here for seeming to raise a dichotomy that we really don't need, which is that this is the way the men are and this is the way the women are. I bring it up here only because it's a useful construct to look at the history of this analysis. Otherwise, I'd be happy to leave it behind. Black Americans in the 1960s were not assuaged by the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act. The new laws were good ones, but they couldn't change the racism that underlay the inner city riots. Racism was not a finite game and couldn't be changed with new finite game rules. What was required was a social and cultural transformation that would permit black people to be seen and to see themselves legitimately in power. Whether she imagined being engaged in an infinite game, Elaine Brown, the then chairwoman of the Black Panther Party, had this to say then about the possibility of transforming America's racism. What she had to say could stand as prologue to charitable organizations' mission statements the world over. If you are committed, if you seriously make a commitment, and that commitment must be based not on hate but on love, then you're going to have to realize that this may have to be a lifetime commitment. So don't get hung up on your own ego and your own image and pumping up your muscles and putting on a black beret or some kind of Malcolm X hat or whatever other regalia and symbolic vestment you can put on your body. Think in terms of what you are going to do for black people. I'm saying that these are the long haul. The third example involves a Jewish concept, tikkun olam, which translates roughly as repairing the world. And it's an entreaty to do just that every day, despite the certainty that the world will never be fully repaired. It's a Mothers Against Drunk Drivers occasion all over again. Aside from the good work that it engenders, its beauty lies in the sidestep that it permits, relieving one from anxiety over not doing the impossible. And finally, it captures other ideas current in other Jewish thinking, including two dimensions of some Hasidic teachings. The first of these, this is my take on Hasidic teachings in a Unitarian sanctuary. So check with me later if I'm missing it. But the first of these is the belief in God's immanence in all aspects of the material world. This belief has the view that joy is the preferred human attitude. Earlier Hasidic attitudes had been to adopt a severe melancholic attitude as a safeguard from temptation and sin. But joy worked better, for it could be expressed with the body in music and dance, and even in the darkest of circumstances, it could turn into a defiant posture. An effort was made during World War II in the Warsaw Ghetto to record daily life for posterity. And the precious documents that resulted were sealed and buried in milk bottles. Notes now unearthed show that near a small synagogue there, a large banner hung that said, "Jews do not despair." The writing then goes on. The Jews there dance as they did before the war. A man whose daughter had died the day before danced the next day after prayers. It's a surprise for sure. joy become defiance. The second fundamental element of this Hasidic sensibility was the idea to enlarge the sphere of religiously meaningful acts to include mundane, secular activities. This idea blurred the line between the sacred and the profane, and as a result, every activity performed with the proper consciousness could become a meaningful religious encounter. This appealed to theologians, new thinkers such as Martin Buber, who saw in them a path to re-enchanting the world in opposition to the spread of what are the greatest evils of the world today? Re-enchanting the world in opposition to the spread of technology and instrumental reason. By instrumental reason, I take it to mean that he means the rules for finite games. Here's how you get from here to there. Just do it. And so this Jewish tradition presented people with an openness to revelation even when they were encountering the most day-to-day matters. For Buber and others, including us, the tradition put at the center a continuous possibility for wonder. If they can pull it off, so can we. Let me conclude this way. I remember talking to Joe, here's a new perspective on such things. It sets me free from imagining that difficulties must be worked out on a timetable, From imagining that there will be no surprises. It sets me free from fretting over not having anticipated them, from thinking I should be serious in a life where being playful might be more creative. Put more affirmatively, it gives me the criterion for how I might act in my relations. I should do all I can to make them continue, and I should trust that the others are doing this too. This is a happy, positive feedback loop. We need all of them we can get. I can feel strong because I can allow others to do what they wish in the course of my play with them. That we're all in this together as part of the game, and thus my future will unfold as it does for many reasons, including how everyone chooses to play the game with all the others, including me. This encourages me to play to keep the game going, and I do. For I see as I age that because I have aged and thus become less essential to the continuation of the play, I will now be able to play best and most freely. On this, think of how your relations with others have evolved over the years. Can you sense in your own changes that your life is like art, like Rilke's art, something dramatic, not theatrical, something always opening forward, something beginning that cannot be finished, but you do it nonetheless. There are no scripted roles for us. The absence of any rules for performance precisely constitutes our lives as art. We prepare to be surprised by the future, playing in complete openness. Not an openness as in candor, but an openness as in vulnerability. Not unchanging identity, but rather ceaseless growth. This then can be our congregation evolving. The values are community, service, and love. The horizon is whatever we can imagine. It is not a limit. We do all this together with laughter, playfulness, and an eye peeled for the possibilities of surprise. Thanks.
You're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
LOVE-BB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256 or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed.
And be a blessing.